Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelic. Today, I'm having a chat today with Kevin Cannella from Thank You Life. You're the executive director there. It's great to have a chat with you, Kevin. How are you, mate?
Hey, what's happening? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. It's been nice just talking in the green room with you before we press record. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And a good place to start is, with who you are. So if you want to tell folks a bit about you and your kind of story with psychedelics and getting to be where you are with Thank You Life.
Yeah, totally. It's a big story.
Yeah, and you can take a long time. Seriously, man, it's cool. People are cool with listening.
Totally. Yeah. So, I'm a psychotherapist by training, and currently have a bit of a private practice going, and am the executive director and co-founder along with Dr. Dan Engel at Thank You Life. And we got our 501c3, so we're a nonprofit that got our 501c3 in December, and our mission is really to we provide direct grants for people who cannot afford psychedelic therapy. So our mission is really to bring access to everyone, and we've just noticed that this movement. I mean, on one hand, psychedelic therapy is really expensive, and we keep hearing the phrase that this is just like a very white and wealthy movement, and so we really want to help other communities get this work. And our main focus is on the financial piece, and really wanting to make finances not an issue, and let people pay what they can afford, and really bring this idea of equity into health, mental health, and the psychedelic space. So how I got involved in that, and like my background with psychedelics, I did some psychedelics in undergrad, and they were just really profound. Did them with a bunch of friends, and I don't think I really had the language for this, but they were very mystical in nature for me. And I remember this one, my last year of undergrad, and I was like looking over campus and at this fraternity house that I was living in, and all of these like giant structures in my mind just seemed to crumble. Like money, the idea of money, the idea of like needing to get a corporate job, and I was and then just campus and like education, all these things just like crumbled in my mind, and I was left with this kind of expansive awareness. And I don't know, it was very destabilizing for a 20-year-old, but also was just like, okay, well, I don't think I want to go get a corporate job, because there's something about it that just doesn't seem, I don't know, like it exists, or like it's that real. I don't know, it's an interesting way to put it, but that was just such a profound experience that led me like to want to go explore something else. And so my last semester, I really just started researching different ways to go abroad, whether that was, to au pair somewhere, to go teach English in South America or somewhere in Asia. I was just looking at all these different opportunities. And then was also just reading this book, a Daniel Pinchbeck book, where he was doing ayahuasca. And that was the first time I'd heard of ayahuasca. And by this time I was reading all kinds of, books about, Terence McKenna and psychedelics, and a bunch about spirituality and Buddhism and all different sorts of things. Psychedelics was just definitely a big topic of these books. And this is the first time I heard about ayahuasca. And I had one friend in Atlanta who was not part of the sort of undergrad scene. She was more part of a more like conscious scene. And so I asked her about ayahuasca, and like, hey, is this available? Can you do this? Like, how do you do this? And she let me know that there was retreat centers down in the Amazon that you could go to. So I went home and Googled ayahuasca retreat centers and emailed 3 of them. And one of them that I emailed was the Temple of the Way of Light. And they got back to me. And yeah, we set up like a volunteer sort of situation for myself. And yeah, I ended up graduating December 2009 from Georgia Tech. And 3 weeks later was down in Iquitos in the Amazon. And yeah, volunteered for like 4.5 months with the Temple of the Way of Light, and just, really launched my interests and exploration into a whole new realm of things. I ended up staying down in Peru for about 7.5 months. Did a shamanic yoga teacher training,
Awesome.
which was a very kind of interesting thing. But I had never done yoga, so really dove deep into yoga. I also did my first vipassana meditation course down there, a 10-day silent meditation course. So yeah, and all of that was within 7 months. So it was just like a lot of ayahuasca, first deep dive into meditation, and kind of first deep dive into yoga. And it was really difficult and lonely there, but also it was like really what I was asking for, which was I felt really fulfilled and happy in undergrad. And there's a spiritual calling of like, okay, how can I get this without everyone around me? Like, how can I get this more internally than have it be such based on circumstance? And so, yeah, I had everything really ripped away from me when I was down in Peru, and it was really difficult, but also got like a great sort of foundation going, learning these different things. That was 2010. That ultimately led into like 2011 through 2015. I went to Hawaii, landed on Maui, spent 4.5 years there, mostly like work trading on farms. There's a bunch of these Vipassana meditation courses happening on the Big Island that I kept going there for. And yeah, really just spent the next 4 years. They were just such expansive years for me. And there's a really rich spiritual community on Maui, and kind of sub communities within that. And there was really just like kind of 4 different things that I really dove deep into. The Vipassana, the ayahuasca was also happening on Maui. And then there was a lot of Sufism on Maui. And then there's also a spiritual teacher there that I ended up spending. Well, he wasn't there. He's this Brazilian man, but he would come there about once a year. And there was a community there like around him and his teachings. And so yeah, it was just this really expansive time where I was kind of diving into all 4 of these things. And, the through line with psychedelics was that the ayahuasca was there. And then for me, that led to, that was a lot of like the middle of my 20s. And by the time I was like 27 or so, really on one hand, I was just tired of being poor. I was very much this work trader who, didn't have a lot of money. I made about $10,000 in a 3-year period total, which in a sense I'm like very proud of that I was able to pull off what I did. But it was also really stressful in a few different ways. And so, and I was also, with all the spirituality, really coming into a sense of like dharma and service and purpose. And, none of these things were really activated within me or actualized in any sort of way. So I just really felt this itch to find that. And so in 2015, I ultimately left Maui and had this real particular intention for myself. I wanted to align my work and my finances with my dharma and my purpose. And I gave myself a summer to not really think about that, but just explore, kind of travel around the mainland US. And I ended that summer spending a month in Brazil with that spiritual teacher from Maui. And it was there that I really got the direct guidance for the next thing, and which was to go to Boulder, go to Naropa University to become a psychotherapist. And yeah, that all just happened in one evening. I was just hanging out with a friend or two, and one of them was from Boulder. The main two places that the spiritual teacher would visit in North America, I mean, Maui's not really North America, but in the US was Maui and Boulder. And so there's, big, sanghas in those two places. And so this one woman from Boulder said to me 4 times in a conversation, "You should move to Boulder. You should move to Boulder. You should move to Boulder." It's like, all right. So that night I just went and sat down in meditation before bed, and my mind was just churning on this idea of Boulder. I had already heard of Naropa, so that connection was kind of there already. But honestly, I had a lot of attachment to this idea of living in Hawaii. I thought it was very cool that I was this person who somehow lived in Hawaii. Um, so I was really just churning on that. And then I really just like let go. I was like, okay, I know how this works. If I'm really meant to go to Boulder, I'll get some signs. And so I kind of let go of all of that. And this was kind of how I ended up in Hawaii to begin with, just this idea of kind of synchronicity and getting some guidance. But it showed up differently this time. I didn't really get any signs, but I just couldn't stop thinking about Boulder. So I woke up and like the next 2 days could not stop thinking about Boulder, what it would be like to move there. Kept looking up Naropa and their programs, and it became clear that okay, this I might not be getting the external signs, but the internal signs are all going in a very particular direction. And yeah, after getting back to the mainland, really just applied to Naropa, and that was all 2015, and applied like November 2015, and by January 2016 was in Boulder, living at my aunt and uncle's and starting school. And so that was all very, very much a whirlwind and very quick. Yeah, and then I spent the next couple of years going to grad school, becoming a psychotherapist, and what was amazing to me was it was really so. I went to Georgia Tech in undergrad, and it was really difficult to leave this sort of fairly prestigious school where all my friends were wicked smart, all these engineers, they're all going into corporate jobs, getting paid well. And on one hand, it was just difficult to say no to all of that and to go do my own thing. And then during my time on Maui, it was just like, I had a sense that it was going somewhere, but I also wasn't sure. And I was like, am I just going to wake up at 45 one day and be some like pot smoking hippie who's still like a work trader on a farm? And not that there's anything wrong with that, I guess, but there's something in me that just didn't really want that. And so, yeah, I wasn't totally sure that what I was doing was going anywhere. And applying to Naropa was the first time that I was able to tell my story in a way that was actually meaningful to people. I was sharing with my family and my college friends a bit of my adventures, and they were like, "Yeah, that's cool. You're doing some crazy stuff, and also, is it going to go anywhere?" So applying to Naropa was the first time that I was able to, share about all of this meditation that I have done, share about these psychedelic explorations that I had done. And it was actually of value. It was actually something that they were like, "Oh, wow, you've really been doing your own work. You've really been on your own journey. And because of that, we think you'd be a great fit for our program." So that was just really such a turning point for me, to feel like I was going from just kind of being out in space by myself to all of a sudden having an institution that was really plugged back into the matrix, so to speak, say, "Yes, we love what you did, and we're glad that you did what you did, and it's useful, and it's valuable." And yeah, that was just definitely a really profound moment.
Awesome.
But yeah, so to go back to that, went to Naropa, really like took a break from psychedelics for a while and really just kind of dove into psychotherapy proper and studying all of that. And then, although as I was applying, I had heard of on a podcast actually about the MDMA studies. And so there was a little seed in my mind of like, oh, cool. Like this might take me to continue to work with psychedelics in a particular way. And by the time I graduated, I was hearing a lot about ketamine and how that was something that was already commercial, already being used legally. So I graduated, ended up getting into my own private practice, did a bunch of ketamine trainings and other sort of trauma trainings, and yeah, got into that work. Started doing ketamine in my own private practice. Had a brilliant supervisor, Pierre Bouchard, out of Boulder, who
Wow, that's amazing. You got Pierre. He's also a fantastic DJ. Yeah, I think DJ'd our
yes,
5-year birthday party online.
oh yeah, he's great, and yeah, the music. Just how he thinks about music and playing music and just having some access to his Spotify playlist has been such a big part. I love how much music is part of the psychedelic healing. Um, yeah. So yeah, all of that was happening, and that you know doing work and doing ketamine work in really like in this space kind of brings us back to Thank You Life, and that's where not just me but a lot of us were noticing, okay, cool, this work is really expensive, a lot of our clients can't actually afford this. um it's one thing for our clients to afford, say, like $150 a week to come and see us for an hour, but okay, now all of a sudden there's that, and then there's like three, four, $500 every other week for a ketamine session, thousands of dollars total. It's a lot for people. And so, yeah, a lot of us just had this idea of like, hey, wouldn't it be great if there's just a fund that us as therapists could plug into? Because what I was seeing is that the financial burden, if the client couldn't pay, the financial burden was falling on the therapist or the clinic. Although a lot of what was in my field was just therapists in private practice, and so therapists can take some sliding scale people. Maybe they even do some pro bono, but they still need to make a living, and they can't just be giving away their hours and their time. And so, yeah, this sort of utopian thought was like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if there was just a fund that we could all plug into, and then that fund could take the financial burden, and we could just be saying yes to the people that we want to be saying yes to. So that was kind of how the idea for Thank You Life originally formed. And then during actually one of my own ketamine journeys, I just got this real direct hit of like, go start this now. And the sort of reasoning behind it was that we want to be like a really built out organization by the time MDMA and psilocybin hit the market. And so that's the work we're doing at the moment. And, ketamine's already here, and that will allow us to, we can use ketamine as a sort of training ground to like build out our operations and expand our network. And yeah, I think the tipping point for this whole movement will come when psilocybin and MDMA really hit more.
Thank you, Life, and thank you, Kevin. That was an awesome just intro to you and the evolution of you. And I'm definitely noticing multiple periods of your life where you relied heavily on intuition. And yeah, this is something that we've been teaching in our Vital group lately, and I'm talking about it all the time because it's just happening for me personally and many of us is, what is intuition? And Jung spoke about synchronicity quite a bit, and kind of levels of consciousness and realms of being and meeting each other and spaciousness within us. So the meditation experience that you had, it's probably wonderful to think back, how's that helped me get to be who I am, and to guide me. That kind of ability to ask questions and sit and wait and just be with the openness there. So thanks for sharing that. I definitely relate to a lot of what you were saying, and I have some counter-transference happening here, particularly around Vipassana retreats in Thailand that were life-changing. And it's just interesting that how do we interpret intuition and signs? I had an experience in New Zealand. I fasted for 12 days with one big question in my mind, and I was waiting for the sign, and the sign came. There was an asteroid kind of came literally in that divine second that I opened my eyes from ecstatic drumming on the beach. I said, "Where's my sign?" And then this asteroid kind of came plummeting to Earth from the sky. I was like, "Oh, okay, thank you," literally like that. And I was just fasting. That was all, and so I said, "Right, I'm going to do this now." And then a few years down the line, I was like, "Oh, maybe I should have interpreted the sign the other way." But there was a part of me that just wanted it to go a certain way, and it was the wrong decision, and it was the right decision, because I needed to make the wrong decision, because it taught me so much about myself and what's actually important to me that I wasn't at that stage quite ready to listen to, or didn't know how to interpret or trust more deeply. So it's wonderful to hear for you. What kind of experience you've been through. What would you say, looking back, some of your intuitive experiences, your medicine journeys, times in nature, in the jungle, within that space of meditation in yourself? What are some of the lessons that's taught you that have helped you to kind of trust the growth experience and to kind of be holding where you are right now with Thank You Life?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And it really reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen Steve Jobs' 2005 commencement speech at Stanford.
Not yet.
It's a great little 18-minute thing. He tells these 3 stories, and one of them is about connecting the dots and how we can only connect the dots backwards. His little story about that is how he did these. He dropped out of college and then would drop into these classes that he was interested in, since he was kind of free to, he didn't have any kind of curriculum that he needed to follow. And he would drop into these calligraphy classes and like learn all this calligraphy. And then, down the line, when they're building out their version of, Word, it was all that calligraphy that like gave him the idea to incorporate all these different fonts. And so to think like, I mean, I'm sure it would have happened in some kind of way anyway, but like to think that all of us use fonts on computers and it's all tied back to Steve Jobs dropping into these random calligraphy classes after he dropped out of college is like such a interesting thread. Anyway, his whole thing is like, we can only really connect the dots backwards. And so I also just sense that with like, hearing you and your struggle and relating to my own experiences, like it can be so stressful and tense in the middle of making these decisions and all the uncertainty. And then looking back, it's like, of course, like I see the clarity now. I see why this needed to happen, that needed to happen. And the decision that I made, like, of course I made that decision, or of course, like, it all makes sense now. But yeah, being in it, much more difficult. Yeah, what was the actual question around
boy,
it?
me and questions. We have an interesting relationship with each other. So I like what you were saying about Steve Jobs. You can only connect the dots backwards, kind of learning from just evolution of our narrative arcs. So I guess your narrative arc, understanding the role of plant medicine, being in nature as well, is coming up a lot, listening to you speaking, Kevin. Meditation and consciousness, plant medicine, the world at large, humanity, and intuition, and that space of kind of listening to the call when it comes. So looking back, anything that stands out for you that's really played a key kind of North Star guiding you forwards, that has kind of made itself clear to you, this is now really important to me, or maybe it always has been, and I can now kind of name it and hold it up as something that I'm going to fight for. or believe in, or kind of embody.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, definitely this idea of trust, the idea of synchronicity has also played a huge role. Um, I remember sitting in my bedroom before I went to Hawaii, and this was like back at home at my mom's house after Peru, and I was really just trying to figure out how to get in touch with my guidance, and was trying to figure out what was going to be the next step. I just had this wild experience, leaving the country, going down to Peru, doing all these things. But also now I was like 23 and back at home at my mom's with very little money. So it's like, okay, I was very clear, like, I'm not done. I don't want to just go get a job now. There's still more exploration. So how do I find out what the next thing is? And so that was just, it felt like the beginning of what I think was a years long process of how do I get in touch with my intuition? How do I get in touch with my guidance? Where is this information coming from? And then how do I gauge this information about, like you were saying, oh, maybe I should have taken the sign the other way. It can be really difficult. Yeah. I think one thing that has helped is to ask for things to be obvious. That really worked for Hawaii specifically. Um, but yeah, it's such a difficult ongoing question. I think for me currently, um, a lot comes through when I sit for meditation. I feel like if I don't sit for meditation for a while, my sit will just mostly be like tons of thoughts, and I'll just have like a pen and paper by and just like write down a bunch of stuff that needs to happen. Um, and then also the past few years is medicine journeys, which for me has just been like 2 hour ketamine lozenge journeys. uh, that's been like the core place that a lot of decisions have come from to start Thank You Life, and various decisions about like where to take Thank You Life. um, so I mean, to me it's just like whether it's with you know medicine, psychedelics, or just meditation, it's just about creating space in life for something to come through that's just not our own kind of thoughts and our and or just content from the matrix.
Yeah, that's really important from a psychedelic perspective, that we first need space. In a sense, we need to have some kind of openness, emptiness, to allow us just to see what is really there, or what might come into it. And from a position of kind of alchemy, just to be formed, like we are kind of crucibles, constantly, melting, merging, and flowing, and never being the same, kind of one day to the next. So, yeah, we've got to be open to that. Otherwise, we probably accumulate a lot of heaviness and pain, and end up looking back and joining the dots again and thinking, if only I'd paused a bit more. So I'm trying to bring that into my own life quite a bit. I want to talk about Thank You Life from a few different perspectives, because it's an ambitious project here, and I really want to break it down and understand it, and for our listeners to understand it, because we are on the precipice of big things happening. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, and not everyone's going to be happy about it, but there's an infrastructure being built, and there's so much need for this psychedelic treatment to be accessible, and that word gets thrown around a lot: accessibility, like diversity and inclusion and sustainability, and words that have meaning, but they can be thrown around a wee bit too much. But when it comes to accessibility, money is inevitably part of that question. We have to talk about money, and not just how much do things cost, but also how much do people get paid to do the work. Like, I've spoken before about being in private practice. I don't take insurance because I can't do all the paperwork, and it's just I wouldn't get paid as much, and I just couldn't pay the bills. To do, say, a ketamine session, that might be 2-3 hours or so. It's expensive. An MDMA session might be 6 to 8 hours, really expensive. So how do I get paid for like a whole day doing an MDMA session? And I've personally always had one client that I see a kind of sliding scale discount. That's my bit, but I'd love to do more. So maybe just starting from that clinician's perspective, what's your sense of what you know are the priorities around clinicians, practitioners that want to work with psychedelics, but might struggle with how much potentially they get paid? Now how just kind of riff off that one to start with, from that perspective of the practitioner.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like we both have a bit of a lived experience with that, and yeah, on one hand, we're masters trained therapists, and so with or without psychedelics, I think there's a certain amount of like worth that we have, and financial remuneration that we are that we're deserving of. And that was just something interesting to me as I was in school and looking around, and it seemed like a lot of master's level therapists made 45 grand a year and were super overworked and underpaid. And that looked like hell. And boy, let me tell you, like, when the what it feels like in my body when I would do a session for like $70 compared to 150, it's different. It's different to get paid well. It's a different energetic experience to get paid well. Yeah, and I have so much more to give when I'm getting paid well, because I'm not burdened by feeling undervalued and feeling like I'm just in this like uphill battle with you know, making a good financial living for myself and my family. I think good therapists deserve to make six figures, like as just a kind of baseline. And there's a rampant mental health problem in this country. So how do we make sense of all that? And where's that money going to come from? I don't know exactly. But yeah, coming from like the clinician perspective, I think we deserve to get paid well. Now, I think what we're talking about in like a six-figure income for somebody in private practice is super doable, especially with psychedelics. Now there's a whole other thing is like, okay, well, what about like the clinic model and psychedelic clinics, where there's just a lot more overhead and perhaps there's all other kinds of staff, including nurses and doctors and all different things, or just even non-clinical staff. Yeah, again, I don't necessarily have answers to all of that, but I also want clinics to be able to, thrive and make money. I feel, and I really want them to be able to pay their clinicians well. I don't care for, some big, like franchise clinic making money hand over fist. Like, I don't have any interest in that. But I do want these clinics to be able to thrive and make money, and for the clinicians to be paid well. Yeah, and that's definitely one piece of the issue. Like, even the private practice model, if everyone could pay for it, the sense that I'm getting is that ketamine clinics are still trying to figure out how to make money and get in the black and out of the red.
Yeah, it's important to talk about money because the need is so massive for healing, and it's going to becoming mainstream commercialized very, very soon. So people are going to be saying, hey, I need this, or I want this, I've been referred to this, but I can't afford it, my insurance doesn't cover it, or my copay is really high. So yeah, awesome you're doing this. And you're saying the clinicians that will be part of the network or partnerships that you develop through Thank You Life, could that be one clinician in private practice? Could it be a telehealth ketamine company and their folks that take part? Like, what are the criteria at the moment for,
Totally.
who can be part of more the clinical framework you're developing?
Yeah, so we have a provider network. I know you had Sherry Reese from Enthea on a couple weeks
Yeah, from
ago.
Enthea. Yeah, that was great.
So we have we're very similar. We're building out a provider network, and yeah, we're looking at private practice and clinics. We're not doing telemedicine with ketamine. Um, so yeah, we have a very similar vetting process to them. We currently have about 30 providers from probably 20 different states or so, kind of a handful up and down the East Coast, and then a bunch in Texas, Colorado, California, Oregon. Um, the sort of main line in the sand that we're drawing in terms of our vetting process is we want to support CAP, ketamine assisted psychotherapy. Um, I'm sure there's people getting benefit from IV ketamine without therapists. And I mean, I know that people are getting benefit from that. And I also know that some people have really difficult times with that and don't know how to integrate with what comes up. And that sometimes their trauma comes up and it's not really held. So we're focusing on ketamine assisted psychotherapy and that model where there's we're open to group, and a lot of different clinics are really looking at group work, especially just from a financial perspective for the clients. It's can be much more affordable to do a group model, and there's a lot of kind of community benefits that can come in with the group model. But nonetheless, there's going to be a therapist in the room, whether it's individual ketamine assisted psychotherapy or group ketamine assisted psychotherapy. It's not going to be the more medical model of like a doctor or a nurse just plugged me into an IV and now I'm in a room by myself. And there's no emotional support. There was no prep. There was no psychological prep for a journey. Um, so yeah, that's the real line in the sand that we're drawing is we want clinics who are doing ketamine assisted psychotherapy and there's therapists in the room really facilitating a psychotherapeutic psychedelic experience.
That sends a very strong message to the provider network around how
Mhm.
strongly you value the preparation sessions and the integration sessions.
And integration. Yep,
Yeah,
100%.
that's a strong message. I feel very similar. Yes, IV has benefits, but I agree that to get the kind of long-term cumulative benefits and just to learn about self and really go deeper and make it more self-reliant, self-sustaining, then that's where the therapy comes in. And I checked out some of the clinics you've got on board so far. So it's Field Trip, Rainfall, Polaris. So, clinically really strong. So we know Polaris and Veronica Gold and Rainfall and Steve Rosenke really well. So yeah, they're awesome people. Field Trip's good too. They're just a bit bigger and we're not so intimately friends with you. So no hard feelings, Field Trip. But yeah, some good, solid clinics there. Really awesome to see. And it makes sense as well, Kevin, why you'd want to build this model around kind of a wraparound service for the client. Because when MDMA and then psilocybin come through, that's a huge treatment endeavor for a patient to go through as a series of treatment, and for a clinical team to deliver that is massive. And I love that you're open to groups too. I think we're going to see heaps of different protocols evolving for different kind of triage levels of need and acuity and demographics. So great you recognize that.
Yeah, and that's one of just the most interesting things, especially with ketamine, is the different treatment protocols and how this can show up. And it can be administered with IV, IM, intramuscular, or these lozenges, and it can be groups, can be individual, and I mean, yeah, it seems like the protocols are endless, and the amount of combinations. I mean, I feel like almost every single clinic that we're working with does it in a slightly different way, and that's all of them doing CAP. That's all of them doing ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and it's still all a little bit different. Um, this gets into something that we were talking about in the green room a little bit, which is just the whole sort of regulatory infrastructure and the difference between ketamine, psilocybin, and MDMA. My sense is that when MDMA comes online, it's is coming through this relationship that MAPS has with the FDA. My sense is that that will be really highly regulated, and the FDA will essentially implement. My sense is that they'll implement MAPS protocol, and MAPS will have a lot of influence as to like the sort of regulations. I mean, they've already been building it out as clinicians like you and I have been looking to get MAPS trained for their MDMA work. So my sense is that MDMA will be highly regulated on a federal level, and so that will kind of just take care of itself. Then there's psilocybin, which is more like on a state by state level, as we watch Oregon and Colorado pass legislation for psilocybin therapy. So in some senses, my guess is that will be pretty highly regulated, but on a state level. But then the variation state to state, who knows how we'll see that happen. And then there's ketamine, which is federally legal because it's a Schedule III substance. And what we were saying before is like it's really up to the doctors how it goes. So because it's Schedule III, doctors have so much a good bit of freedom to prescribe it off label, which all of this is, and describe or prescribe any of these three administration routes. They can give a prescription for somebody to take lozenges home with them if they want, or to take them home to go see a therapist in private practice. So it's like there's almost no regulations. We like to call it a bit of the Wild West.
Maybe I'll just interrupt. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah,
you mentioned Oregon. So how do you, as a non-profit, just wearing that hat as a non-profit, Thank You Life, view what's happening in Oregon and soon to be Colorado from that perspective of accessibility? To what extent is that a nuanced model that you can work within?
Yeah. So one thing, unfortunately, that we won't be able to do as a 501c3 is we will only be able to work with things that are federally legal, which includes ketamine, but at the moment does not include psilocybin. So that just won't be something that we'll really be able to participate in at the moment when psilocybin's happening on a state-to-state level. So I think, although we'll be able to affect access nationally with ketamine, at the moment I think that's more just like an open question because we won't be able to give direct grants to psilocybin therapy happening in Colorado and Oregon. So yeah, they're going to have to solve access in a different way. And I think there are a number of ways to solve access, in insurance and bringing insurance on board, which I think is one movement, is happening. There's also just the legislation piece and like the decrim piece of all of this. Ultimately, these things need to be legal for there to be more access. That's like one level of it all. I think insurance will cover a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people, and that will be super helpful. Then there's things like Enthea, and also what we're looking into, which is how much employers are looking to offer this to their employees. Just another place that access gets to happen. And I think it can be one big shift in the whole sort of way our culture looks at mental health if it becomes a standard that employers offer psychedelic assisted psychotherapy for trauma healing. I mean, what a shift that would bring just on its own. And that, we have somebody on our board who talked about her experience of exploring psychedelics, but really doing it in the dark, not telling people that she was relating to professionally about this, and being scared to bring up that she was doing it. And so, how different would it be if not only could you like share with your boss that you got a ketamine treatment, but that the company was actually paying for it and saying, yes, like go get your healing. So I think that's a huge place that access can happen. And then my sense is that what we're trying to do on one hand is fill in the gap before insurance exists with these direct grants. But then also, once insurance is there, there'll be a whole sort of underbelly of people who don't have health insurance, especially in this country where health insurance is dog shit. Um,
Yep. Yeah. I'm nodding my head. Yeah.
yeah. That people won't have health insurance and will need some sort of supplemental support. So, I think that's where we can come in and continue to help with this piece of access. Just to kind of finish out other ways that access shows up, I think there's a lot of education that can happen to particular communities. We've heard from some advisors of ours who are part of BIPOC and queer communities that there's a lot of education that needs to happen for especially the BIPOC community to be more trusting of medical things in general, and specifically psychedelics. So I think there's also a whole education piece with it, and then especially with communities of color and the queer community, getting clinicians who are also part of those communities, that clients from those communities can really relate with and see themselves in. I think all of that will also help with access.
Yeah, that's a huge piece. And there's actually a really interesting parallel between what Thank You Life is doing and what our diversity fund for our vital students are doing. So last year we gave away $211,000 of scholarships for students to take our course who otherwise would not have been able to. Great students. And so we had folks from all over the world, and it's just brought in so much more diversity and knowledge, and it's going to have even greater impact in the world when these students graduate and go on with what they're doing. So it's similar to what you're saying. In a sense, you're enabling folks that may not normally be able to afford ketamine treatment to access it, and it will then go ahead and transform their lives. What kinds of patients are we actually talking about here, Kevin? So what's kind of the rubric matrices that you'll be using to identify, these folks, we really want to help them get the treatment, X percentage, go to this clinic to get that treatment and approved. So like, what's that application and approval process going to kind of shape up like?
Yeah. So I would say in general, we're looking at like anxiety, depression, PTSD is kind of the big three. And with that, we're not going to be making any clinical determination on people. We're mainly making two determinations. One is a financial determination, and I'll rephrase that. We're making one determination, and that's a financial determination. Part of our application is also some questions about like how seriously they're taking this work, a bit about their own journey and past psychedelic use. And that's really just to get a sense of how committed they are to this work. But the main thing that we're looking at is their finances and where they're at and what feels affordable to them. And then we're letting a clinic really say if they're ready for ketamine work. We don't want to like overstep our boundaries with that piece. So our application process is fairly simple because of that. And again, we look at somebody's financial situation and then determine something. So where we're at with that is, I think there's like a couple of different levels where there's people who I think for most people, paying say $5,000 to $7,000 out of pocket is a lot of money. So, we're looking for people that we can help bring that cost down by say 20, 30, 40%. And that helps them be able to say yes to this and afford it. Then there's the people who uh, are in just a much more difficult financial situation, like really low income situation, where they might need 80, 90, 95% support. So I would say those are like the two main levels that of people that we're looking to help. Because again, our main goal is access and to make this affordable. So um, yeah, there's still a certain threshold, but we want to help the majority of people, and some of those it'll be in a minor way, some of those it'll be in a really major way.
And I hope it's okay to ask, how, on the money question, does Thank You Life keep the lights on and pay the bills? So in this model that you're building out, and sorry if that's too kind of pokey, but yeah, I'm just curious. So how do you kind of make it work, and where does the money come from that goes ultimately to a clinic to treat a patient that couldn't afford it themselves?
Totally. So, we really started fundraising the second half of last year. So, we're still super nascent, very new. This podcast is part of our public launch. We're really just launching in March, April 2023 for whenever you're listening to this. But we're recording here on February 8th, so that's like 2 months out from our public launch. So
so you heard it here first, basically, is what we're saying. Awesome. Well, I love that stuff.
Exactly. So yeah, we're really just in a fundraising mode, and we raised a good bit of money last year, definitely enough to get going. And then, we're staying pretty lean, and we think we can continue to stay pretty lean in terms of like operationally. We have a team of 3 of us that are really on payroll, and if we get as big as we'd like to get, that might expand to 5, 6, 7 people. I don't think it needs to expand much more than that. So that's definitely one way. And then, so in terms of our fundraising, individual donors has definitely been the biggest. We got our first corporate sponsor last November, I believe, with Dr. Bronner's. So awesome. That was just such a great win. And we're just so appreciative to them and how they have just been helping this this industry as a whole.
They're always the first ones to step up to the plate. It's awesome. Love what they do.
Yeah. Totally. And then there's there's a couple different foundations that we've gotten grants from, a family foundation, and then also the Educational Foundation of America, I believe. And then, so moving forward this year, we have a couple launch events that we're going to really try to get a lot of individual donors. I'll just shout them out. We have a more private virtual launch on April 8th. That's going to be about 50 to 60 people. And it's really just going to be a fundraising event. So if you're listening to this and happen to think that you might be interested in attending that, feel free to email me at kevin@thankyoulife.org. There's also a more public live stream event that will be on May 11th. And you can find that on any of our social media, our Instagram, which is thankyoulife_fund. And that's much more open to the public. You can sign up for our newsletter. There'll be links on that. And then on April 1st, we'll be at the California Center for Psychedelic Therapy. They're one of the clinics in our network, and we'll be doing a bit of a launch party there, bit of an open house for them as well, and introducing both of us into the industry and into the space.
Awesome, cool. That sounds great. That sounds awesome. Really good to hear where Thank You Life's shaping up. I wanted to ask about Dan Engel, because I've seen online that he's kind of part of the team, the co-founding. Not sure how involved he is day-to-day stuff, but what was that conversation like with Dan around the why of Thank You Life, and of how to build it? Because his seems to be just a really awesome guy from what I've seen online. And yeah, what's that been like actually working with him and having those conversations?
Totally, totally. Yeah. I mean, he's been a real integral part, especially last year as uh, all of this was really forming. And so we actually both had these ideas separately for this fund. Um, and at a certain point, I reached out to him and shared my idea. At the time, I was calling it Heal 1 Billion. So the whole time, we're really trying to go big with this. And yeah, he reached back out and said that he had the same idea. We were both essentially at the same place. We had both bought a URL, had a bit of a shell of a website up, and had the same idea. A fund for psychedelic work um, that clients could just plug into and make it affordable for themselves. So because of that, we just started talking and decided to work together on this project. And yeah, last year really took it from an idea and inception to something substantial and real. And that's actually a 501(c)(3) now. So that was very exciting and just a big year last year. Yeah, and he his role has been crucial, and he's really the one that brought the network in the space. And yeah, he really helped us with our initial raises, because of the people that he knew, and he also really helped us build out our board, again because of the contacts that he was able to bring in. And yeah, and then I mean his vision and inspiration. I haven't even talked about this piece, but there's like a whole research piece that we're looking to do as well. Um, and that's a big piece of his vision. If ideally we're putting through, this might be like next year that we hit 1,000, but we'd love to be putting through thousands of clients a year. And we've put through 2 already, and we've already started collecting data, pre and post data. We're using the Maya Health platform. And if we're putting through thousands of clients, like we might as well be collecting some data on them and using it. So that's something for us to build out, but definitely a piece of our vision. And yeah, I think he and I just have a really similar kind of altruistic piece of us that, and to go back to the spiritual thing, I think we both really just yeah, like but believe in being altruistic in a particular way and trusting that the abundance will come, that the abundance will be there. And that yeah, we don't need to use the psychedelic space for a money grab, that we can actually show up in our integrity and really try to get this work out there, like really focus on the healing and the relieving of suffering that is the promise of this industry. And really commit to that and trust that the finances will be there.
Awesome. I love that trust. We've been speaking about that quite a bit today. And yeah, in the first wave, there's always going to be some folks that see an opportunity, and there'll be kind of just behind them folks that just see a need, and have kind of an ethical, value-based vision for how to support their kind of infrastructure to meet that need.
And there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity to make money here, which is why we're seeing so much capital come into the space. And yeah, I think my hope is that there'll be enough people here who can hold up the integrity of the work.
Yeah, and from a training perspective, I think we don't yet have an organization nationally that kind of regulates us. So we're putting a lot of work into how do we build our curriculums and our teaching teams. What are the core competencies and skills that we have? But yeah, there's going to be a lot of differently trained practitioners out there, because this is psychedelics we're talking about, and there's so many different ways that the psychedelic healing model will evolve over time. So we don't yet know what it's going to look like. It's not just going to be ketamine clinics with MDMA or psilocybin in it. There'll be some that just do that and they'll integrate it, just like a lot of doctors' offices and cosmetic places and anesthesiologists have just added ketamine. So they can do that for sure. But I'm sensing that with MDMA, psilocybin, we are talking about something inherently different, and just the feel of working with someone in that space. It's just different just to do normal kind of CBT therapy, or seeing a psychiatrist and getting some, anti-anxiety meds or SSRIs prescribed. Really different feeling. So we'll need different practitioners to fit that model, different personalities, different ways of interacting, but all competent and ethical at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just a huge question, is like how quickly can we get thousands of competent therapists? Yeah, which I like, my sense is that I think I'm decently competent in this, but there's so much more I can grow into. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just so crucial that these therapists are doing their own personal work and have their own really deep experiences with psychedelics.
Well, I love how you've partnered with some clinics like Rainfall and Polaris that really are experts in training. So the training they provide their team, and they do the practicum works that they do as well. So I think that, there are definitely some clinical folks out there that put huge value into training and kind of the ethics, the values of the team. And that's good to see. I'm so excited by, what this field's going to look like in a few years. I'm really excited to do MDMA psilocybin work myself. So if there's a company like Thank You Life that helps me have a more diverse caseload, that helps my community have more access to breakthrough treatments for healing, wow, that needs to be there. So thank you for being there, and great chatting with you, Kevin. We're kind of top of the hour. What other things have we not mentioned? Is there anything that's kind of bubbling up for you want to share with folks?
Yeah, I'll just say, yeah, we're looking for donations. The way that we will be successful is that if we have a fund full of millions of dollars. So if you feel inspired by what we've talked about and what our mission is to really bring access to the people for psychedelics, feel free again to reach out to me at kevin@thankyoulife.org, or go to our website, thankyoulife.org/donate. And please donate. And if you feel inspired by what we're talking about and want to donate in a large way, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to, for me and my team to meet with you and really unpack in a more detailed way what we're doing, what we're up to, and how the money will be utilized. And thanks so much for having me on, David.
Yeah, I love chatting with you, Kevin. Thank you. And any donors out there, hit Kevin up. It'd be great to make something happen. If you get any big donors come through, let us know. We'd love to celebrate that too. We always appreciate good people helping to build this infrastructure in a way that is fitting for humanity. All right.
Yes.
So I've loved chatting with you. Thanks so much. This has been David Drapkin in a Psychedelics Today conversation with Kevin Cannella from Thank You Life. Have a lovely day, Kevin.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.
Yeah, cheers, man. God bless everyone. Take care.